Hello you guys, welcome back to another video and welcome to my channel. My name is Ja. If you're new, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, and all that wonderful stuff. Follow me on all my social medias down below, and welcome. I'm back with another video from TUV, and this is photos taken right before disaster volume 2. So yeah, sit back, relax, get comfortable, and let's get into it.
What if I told you that the last selfie you took was your last picture ever? Well, thankfully that's not true. Hopefully it's not true. Well, today we're going to be talking about just that. Photos that were taken before disasters, volume 2. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is TUV, and if you notice, the background is a little bit different. Let me turn on the lights just to show you guys. Here we are. This is not a new room. It's the same room, except the PC used to be right there where the plaques are now. That's where my entire PC used to be. The reason I moved my desktop was just so I can have a better walkway. It's way better when we stream over on twitch.tv/Tuvington_ in case you care. But this is why you're seeing a new background. The only thing is I need to find a way to put my ambient red lights in the background because I turn off the lights and there is no ambient red light. So I'm going to get that figured out hopefully within the next 2 videos. But yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the new setup. With that being said, yes, we are going to be talking about a disturbing topic, you know, photos taken right before disasters. So if that sounds interesting to you, keep watching, make sure you're comfortable, and let's get right into the topic. Thai diver Saman Kunan. On June 23, 2018, 12 kids from a local football team called the Wild Boars and their 25-year-old assistant coach decided to go exploring in Thailand's Tam Luang cave system. It was supposed to be a quick adventure after their football practice ended. The team grabbed their bikes, raced through the rice paddies, and headed up into the forested hills to check out their favorite hangout spot. Now, here's the thing about the Tam Luang cave. It's massive, snaking for about 10 kilometers beneath this mountain range. The boys had been there plenty of times before, sometimes going as deep as 8 kilometers for team initiation rites. So they stashed their bikes by the entrance, grabbed their torches, and headed into the cave. What they didn't know was that it had been raining heavily for days, and all that water was about to turn their innocent adventure into an absolute nightmare. While they were deep inside, a flash flood hit. The cave system that was normally dry suddenly became a death trap with water levels rising fast. The boys had no choice but to scramble even deeper into the cave, eventually finding themselves trapped on a small rocky ledge about 4 kilometers from the entrance. They were completely cut off from the outside world. And then, the most intense rescue operations began, with divers from around the world rushing to Thailand to help. One of these brave people was Saman Kunan, a 38-year-old former Thai Navy SEAL who volunteered to help with the rescue. And this is the last photo they took of him, suited, ready to dive deep into those flooded cave tunnels to deliver oxygen tanks to the trapped boys. There's also this video of him where he looked straight at the camera and said, "We'll bring the kids home." But on July 6, while making his way back from placing air tanks along the rescue route, Saman ran out of oxygen himself. His diving partner tried desperately to revive him, but it was too late. All the kids made it, and this man just happened to have ended up making the ultimate sacrifice trying to save them. Dutch tourist disappeared in a jungle in Panama. So we did speak about this case in our ages 1 to 100 unexplained disappearances video. I'm telling you guys that in case this sounds familiar. If you already watched that video, then you can skip over this one and continue with the next one. But if you haven't, then let's get on with the story. Sometimes a simple hiking trip can turn into something absolutely terrifying. And that's exactly what happened to these two girls right here. 21-year-old Chris Kremers and 22-year-old Lisanne Froon from the Netherlands. This photo was taken on April 1st, 2014, and it shows them giving thumbs up, looking totally happy and carefree, as they were about to start what should have been a routine hike on Panama's El Pianista Trail. The two friends have traveled to Panama with plans to volunteer at a local school and just experience life abroad. They were young, adventurous, and excited about exploring this beautiful part of Central America. So on that Tuesday morning, they grabbed their cameras and phones and headed out to tackle this popular hiking trail near Phuket. It was supposed to be a day hike, nothing too crazy. But then things took a really dark turn once the girls never came back. When they didn't return that evening, authorities launched a massive search operation. For weeks, search teams combed through the dense jungle, but it was like Chris and Lisanne had just vanished. No trace of them anywhere. Then, 2 months later, a local woman found a backpack by a riverbank, and it belonged to Lisanne. Inside were their phones, some money, water, and most importantly, their camera. And that's when investigators got their first real clues about what might have happened to these two girls. The phone showed that about 6 hours into their hike, both women had desperately tried calling emergency services, but they couldn't get through because there was no signal in that remote area. Lisanne's phone died on April 6th and never turned on again. But Chris's iPhone kept getting switched on until April 11th, though whoever was turning it on never entered the correct pin to unlock it. But here's the really really creepy part. In that camera, there were about 90 photos that had been taken in complete darkness between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on April 8th. Just flash photography lighting up the pitch black jungle, and strange photos of the back of Chris's head. Months later, scattered remains of both women were eventually found in the jungle, but without their complete bodies. Officials still can't determine exactly how they died or what really went on. Lover turned killer. This guy right here had absolutely no idea he was about to be brutally murdered. This is 30-year-old Travis Alexander, and what you're looking at is literally the last photo ever taken of him alive. It was snapped at 5:29 p.m. on June 4th, 2008, while he was taking a shower in his Mesa, Arizona home, and the person behind the camera was his ex-girlfriend, Jody Arias. Travis was a motivational speaker and salesman who seemed to have his life together. He was a devout Mormon, charismatic, and had big dreams. But he'd gotten involved with Jody, and that relationship turned out to be absolutely toxic. Friends who knew them said she was completely obsessed with him, like scary obsessed. She'd show up at his house unannounced, listen in on his conversations, and even read through his text messages. They'd been dating on and off for about a year and a half, mostly long distance between Arizona and California. And even after they officially broke up, Jody had moved to Mesa to be closer to him, which should have been a huge red flag. When she finally moved back to California in April of 2008, everyone probably thought that that was the end of it. But on June 4th, Jody drove all the way from California to Travis's house. She later claimed they had sex and she was taking photos of him in the shower when she accidentally dropped his new camera. According to her, he got furious and attacked her, so she killed him in self-defense. But here's what really happened. After taking this photo, Jody stabbed Travis 27 times, slashed his throat so deep it nearly decapitated him, and then shot him in the head. Jody's camera was found in Travis's washing machine with deleted photos from that day. Investigators were able to recover images showing not just the final shower photo, but also pictures of Travis bleeding out on his bathroom floor. She literally documented her own crime. So self-defense doesn't really look like it. And she was sentenced to life in prison. Captured a photo of a blast that killed her. Now, this looks like something straight out of a World War II movie, but it's absolutely real. You're literally looking at death coming straight at you. You see that explosion, the fire, and all the debris flying directly towards the camera? Well, that's the last thing 22-year-old U.S. Army Specialist Hilda Clayton saw before she died. Hilda was a combat photographer from Augusta, Georgia, part of what the military calls Combat Camera, the 55th Signal Company. These are the photographers who go into the most dangerous situations to document military operations. They're trained to shoot photos and videos in any environment, no matter how deadly it gets. On July 2nd of 2013, Hilda was in Afghanistan's Lagman province doing that exact job. She was photographing an Afghan National Army border validation exercise, basically a training session where Afghan soldiers were learning to properly use mortar tubes. This was during a critical time when the U.S. was trying to train Afghan forces to take over their own security. Hilda was working alongside an Afghan photojournalist that she'd been training, documenting this partnership between American and Afghan forces, but then everything went wrong in an instant. The mortar tube accidentally exploded instead of firing the round properly, and in that split second when death was literally flying at her, Hilda kept shooting. The explosion killed her instantly, along with 4 Afghan National Army soldiers, including the photographer she'd been training. But somehow her camera survived, and this incredible, terrifying final image was recoverable. A few hours before he got killed by an erupting mountain. This is David Alexander Johnston, enjoying a peaceful moment on a beautiful spring day in Washington State, just sitting in his folding chair, writing in his notebook, and flashing that genuine smile at the camera. But here he is, completely clueless that in less than 13 hours, a massive volcanic eruption would kill him. David was a 30-year-old volcanologist from Chicago who devoted his life to studying volcanoes. He was part of the USGS monitoring team, keeping a close eye on Mount St. Helens, which had been acting up for months. The mountain had been dormant since the 1840s, but in March of 1980, it started showing serious signs of life. Earthquakes, steam eruptions, and most worryingly, a massive bulge growing on its north side. This photo was taken on the evening of May 17, 1980 at something called the Coldwater 2 Observation Post, about 6 miles from the volcano. As David was busy monitoring these changes, interestingly, by then, he and his colleagues had already figured out something terrifying. They realized that this bulge on the mountain meant Mount St. Helens could produce what's called a lateral blast. Basically, the entire side of the mountain could explode outward instead of just erupting upward like most volcanoes do. That's exactly what happened the next morning. At 8:32 in the morning on May 18th, A magnitude 5.1 earthquake triggered the largest landslide in recorded history. The entire north face of Mount St. Helens collapsed, and then the mountain exploded sideways at supersonic speeds. David, who'd been monitoring everything from his observation post, managed to get on his radio as the blast was racing towards him. His final transmission was, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," and then the radio went silent. The blast reached him in less than a minute. His body was never found. Moments before he pushed his ex-girlfriend off the cliff. This looks like a perfectly innocent hiking photo, doesn't it? Just a girl enjoying a beautiful view on Alabama's Pinhoti Trail, taking in the scenery on what seems like a peaceful day to be outdoors. But in fact, this is the last Instagram photo of Jolie Nicole Callan, taken by her ex-boyfriend Lauren Bunner, just moments before he shot her twice in the head and pushed her off a cliff. Jolie and Lauren had dated but broken up, though they decided to stay friends. On August 30th of 2015, Lauren suggested they go hiking together on the Pinhoti Trail. Jolie agreed, thinking it was just a friendly outing with someone she'd once cared about. But according to investigators, Lauren wasn't handling their breakup well. Jolie's father said Lauren was having trouble, quote, moving on with his life after they split up. So here's Jolie in this final photo, her back to the camera, looking out over this gorgeous mountain view. She has no idea that within minutes, Lauren would pull out a .22 caliber gun and shoot her, first from behind, then between the eyes. And like I already said, after killing her, Lauren threw her body off a 40-foot cliff. He then drove to a different location and called 911 himself. Initially, Lauren claims it was a impact and that Jolie wanted to die, but later investigators discovered he said that if he couldn't have her, nobody could. He was sentenced to 52 years in prison. Murdered 4 hours into an investigative trip in a submarine. This here is 30-year-old Swedish journalist Kim Wall climbing onto this homemade submarine in Copenhagen Harbor on August 10, 2017. She's there to interview the submarine's owner, Danish inventor Peter Madsen, for what she thinks will be an interesting feature story about his unusual crowd-funded project. But this is also the last photo ever taken of her alive. Back then, Kim was at the absolute peak of her career. She studied at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, worked in New York and China, and was writing for major international publications. She was talented, respected, and had a bright future ahead of her. The submarine story was just like a perfect fit. An eccentric inventor who built this 40-ton submarine called UC-3 Nautilus. Sorry if I mispronounced that, I don't know how to pronounce that one. Using money he'd raised online. Peter Madsen on his part seemed like an interesting character. He was known for his ambitious engineering projects and had a reputation as this quirky inventor type. When Kim reached out to interview him, he was more than happy to give her a tour of his submarine. He even suggested they take it out for a ride so she could get the full experience for her article. But according to prosecutors, Madsen had planned something absolutely horrific. They say he brought a saw, knife, and sharpened screwdrivers onto the submarine, and that he'd invited Kim aboard specifically to fulfill violent sexual fantasies. Inside this thing, Madsen tortured her in unspeakable ways. He then dismembered her body in the bathroom, cutting off her head and limbs and throwing the pieces into the sea. After the murder, he then sank his own submarine to try to cover his tracks, but Kim's mutilated body ended up being discovered on a beach 11 days later by a passerby. Madsen was sentenced to life in prison in 2018, and these photos of Kim boarding that submarine are the final images of a brilliant journalist who was just trying to do her job. Train conductor tried to warn them. Next, we have these 3 teenage girls having the time of their lives, just taking a selfie by some train tracks in Utah. They're laughing, they're happy, and completely excited about their adventure. In fact, just before taking this picture, 13-year-old Savannah Webster posts on Facebook, standing right by a train, ha 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 ha, this is awesome. But if you look really closely, you'll see something. See that bright light creating almost like a halo effect behind their heads? Yeah, that's not the sun. That's the headlight of a freight train barreling towards them at 55 miles per hour. This photo was taken literally seconds before all 3 girls were killed. The 3 friends were Essa Ricker, age 15, Kelsey Webster, age 15 as well, and her younger sister Savannah, age 13. On this day in 2011, they'd gone to explore the Covered Bridge Canyon crossing in Utah because they were huge train enthusiasts. They loved watching trains pass by and waving to the engineers. In fact, they'd been waving to the engineers of a Utah railway train that was passing by. They were having so much fun that they decided to take a selfie between the tracks. But what they didn't realize was that there was a second train, a Union Pacific freight train coming from the opposite direction. The gap between these 2 trains was only about 3 to 4 feet, so these girls were essentially trapped between 2 massive trains with almost no room to escape. The conductor started frantically blasting the horn and yelling, trying to warn them, but they didn't pay any attention to it. And with a train going 55 miles per hour, it can take over a mile to stop, even with emergency brakes. There was simply no way to stop the time. That bright light was definitely approaching, and they never knew it. And here are 2 best friends. Cheyenne Antoine on the left, and Brittany Gargle on the right. This is before heading out for a night of partying. They're both 18, they look happy, and according to everyone who knew them, they were absolutely inseparable. But if you look closely at this photo, you'll see something that would later become key evidence in a murder case. That black webbed belt Cheyenne is wearing around her waist. This picture was taken on the evening of March 24th, 2015, in Saskatchewan, Canada. The 2 girls posted it on Facebook and then headed out to hit some bars and have a good time. But within just a few hours of this photo being taken, Brittany would be dead, and that belt Cheyenne's wearing, well, that would be our murder weapon. Early the next morning, a passerby found Brittany's body lying Lying on the side of a road near a landfill in Saskatoon, she'd been strangled to death, and investigators found a black belt near her body. When police started looking into what happened that night, Shan gave them a story about how they'd gone out drinking, met up with some guy, and then Brittany left with him while she went to go visit her uncle. But something fell off, and investigators eventually figured it out. They realized that the belt found at the crime scene matched the exact same belt Shan was wearing in the selfie. Not only that, but they found marks on Brittany's car that were consistent with that belt, and it looked like there had been a struggle. Then they also came to find out that her uncle threw her off the cliff, and when questioned, he claimed that she had asked him to lie about the whole thing. Eventually, this girl confessed, but she said there was a lot of alcohol and drugs, so she didn't actually remember doing it. She was sentenced to only 7 years for manslaughter after pleading guilty. They kissed a few hours before being swept by an avalanche. This is what pure happiness looks like. Norwegian climbers Cecile Skog and Rolf Bay, a married couple bound by their love for mountaineering, stood together at the summit of K2, one of the most dangerous peaks on Earth. Cecile had just become one of the first women to reach the top, and in that moment, they embraced, believing they were living the greatest moment of their lives, until that very mountain tore them apart forever. On August 1st of 2008, they were both part of a massive international expedition ascending K2. K2 is the name of the mountain, by the way. Cecile had reached the summit that day, but Rolf had turned back earlier, feeling tired and possibly suffering from altitude sickness. He waited for his wife, and they began descending together as darkness fell. As they were crossing the fixed ropes that climbers use to safely navigate the most dangerous sections, their teammate Lars asked Rolf if he wanted to go first. Rolf's response was the last thing he'd ever say. Quote, "Lars, I go first. You look after my wife," end quote. Within seconds of those words, a massive chunk of ice broke off from above and swept Rolf right off the mountain, directly into Cecile. She watched her husband disappear into the void. The same icefall that killed Rolf also cut the fixed ropes, trapping 15 other climbers without a safe way down. But Cecile didn't fall apart. Somehow she composed herself and continued descending through the night. When she finally made it to base camp, she had to call Rolf's parents in Norway to tell them that their only child was dead. That single night on K2 became one of the worst disasters in mountaineering history, killing 11 climbers in total. Her killer took the last photo of her. This next photo is genuinely hard to look at once you know what's happening here. The girl in the picture is 14-year-old Regina K. Walters. She's standing in an old abandoned barn in Illinois, and the person who took this photo was her killer, just moments before he murdered her. That man was Robert Ben Rhodes, a long-haul trucker and one of the most disturbing serial killers in U.S. history. For over 15 years, he stalked the highways, turning his truck into a rolling torture chamber. Regina ran away from home and had been hiking with her boyfriend, Ricky Lee Jones. They were young, this is how she looked before all this nightmare. They didn't know any better. When a friendly truck driver came by, they honestly thought they caught a lucky break, but Rhodes was a predator. In the back of his 18-wheeler, he installed chains, restraints, even whips, everything that could cause torture and pain. Investigators think he killed Ricky almost immediately, but he kept Regina alive for a while. How did they know this? Because he took dozens of photos of her over time, as if he was documenting everything like some kind of sick trophy collection. This photo, it's one of the last he ever took of her. He had cut her hair, dressed her in a black dress and heels, clothes she had never owned, nothing like she was wearing when she was taken. And the way she's holding up her hand, like she's trying to shield herself or say, "Please stop," it's just heartbreaking. That barn where the photo was taken is where they would later find her body. But he was free for some time until 1990, when during a routine traffic stop, an officer heard screams coming from the back of his truck, a woman alive, begging for help. Inside, they found his, quote, murder kit, and all the tools he used on his victims. Authorities believe Rhodes may have killed over 50 people. Today, he's serving 2 life sentences without parole. Selfie before tragic Tinder date. This is 24-year-old Sydney Lou from Lincoln, Nebraska, and she's getting ready for what she thinks is another Tinder date. This was on November 15th of 2017. Sydney had matched with a woman named Bailey Boswell on Tinder, and they'd already gone on one date a few days earlier. Everything seemed normal. They hung out, had a good time, and Bailey suggested they meet up again. So Sydney got dressed up, took this photo, and headed out for what she thought would be another great date. But Bailey wasn't operating alone. She was working with her older boyfriend, 56-year-old Aubrey Trail, and together they'd been using Tinder as a hunting ground. Their plan was for Bailey to lure women through the dating app, and then Trail would kill them. Sydney was their target. When Sydney arrived for her second date with Bailey, she was taken to an apartment where Trail was waiting. According to prosecutors, the couple had already bought dismemberment tools from a home improvement store the day before, chilling knowing that all this was while Sydney was still alive and going about her normal life, completely unaware that someone was literally shopping for gear to murder her. Trail later confessed that he strangled Sydney with an extension cord, but during his trial, he tried to claim that it was all just an accident that happened during some kind of sexual encounter gone wrong, but the evidence completely contradicted this lie. After killing her, Trail and Boswell dismembered her body and stuffed the pieces into garbage bags, which they dumped in a field about 90 miles southwest of Lincoln. Sydney's remains weren't found for weeks. And you see that scar on Trail's neck? Well, he did that to himself during the trial. On day 3, he suddenly yelled, "Bailey is innocent, I curse you all," and cut his own throat with a smuggled razor. He survived and tried to use it to get a mistrial, but the court called it a calculated gesture. So he was sentenced to death, while Bailey Boswell got life in prison. Also, if you guys are interested in a full dedicated video to Tinder stories, I do have one. It's named The Dangerous World of Tinder Criminals, and this story was actually in that video. So I go more in depth, in case you care. You're going to see a younger version of me. But yeah, just wanted to make that clear. If you didn't watch that when it came out, it's completely okay. You can watch it after this one. It doesn't really matter too much. But let's head on to the next one. Got overpowered by water currents in Hawaii. What's better than the relaxing sounds of waves hitting rocks? For 22-year-old Navy sailor Shannon Nunez, this peaceful moment at Hawaii's Spitting Caves was probably exactly what she needed. A fun day out with friends, soaking up the Hawaiian sunshine, and getting ready for an adrenaline rush. But this photo was taken moments before she jumped, and it would end up being the last image of Shannon alive. To the YouTube reviewer that's probably going to watch this video, no, this was not a self-delete attempt. It was just a horrible situation that was not planned. Shannon was an officer and aircraft mechanic stationed at the Marine Corps base in Hawaii. She was originally from Whittier, California, and had only been in Hawaii since February of 2014, just a few months before this tragic day in June. Like so many young military personnel stationed in Paradise, she was probably excited to experience all the adventure Hawaii had to offer. The Spitting Cave is this notorious cliff jumping spot near Portlock that gets its name from the way the waves crash into the cave and then get, quote, spit back out as whitewater. It's become this popular daredevil destination where thrill seekers jump from various heights into the ocean below. But what many people don't realize is just how dangerous the currents can be down there. On June 8, 2014, Shannon was there with friends around 1:30 in the afternoon. It was a beautiful Sunday, perfect weather for cliff jumping. She took this photo, posted it, and then she made the 60-foot jump, and initially everything seemed to be fine. But after she hit the water, the strong currents immediately grabbed her and started carrying her away from where her friends could help. Despite being a trained Navy sailor who presumably knew how to swim well, the ocean was just too powerful for her. When the rescue came, it was too late. Guy doing stunts on his new plane. Look at this photo, and all you see is pure joy. This was taken on November 5th of 2017, when MLB Hall of Famer Roy Halladay was celebrating with his son's baseball team, the Florida Burn. This was after they just won a tournament, and 2 days later, Roy was dead, in the most disastrous way possible. Roy Halladay had been one of baseball's greatest pitchers. He'd thrown a perfect game, a playoff no-hitter, made 8 All-Star teams, and was later inducted into the Hall of Fame. But after retiring from baseball in 2013, he developed a new passion, flying. He got his pilot's license and had recently bought this really cool amphibious plane called an Icon A5, which was basically marketed as a jet ski with wings. On November 7th of 2017, Roy took off from a lake near his Tampa home just for a fun flight. The Icon A5 was designed for recreational flying. You could take off from water, do some sightseeing, maybe show off a little. And that's what Roy was doing. But the thing is, Roy allegedly had extremely high levels of amphetamines in his system, about 10 times the therapeutic level, along with morphine and an antidepressant. Basically a recipe for disaster for anyone operating any machinery. Also, he was flying dangerously low, sometimes just 5 feet above the water, doing extreme acrobatics with high-pitched climbs and steep turns. On his final maneuver, Roy entered a steep climb, and his speed dropped to about 85 miles per hour. The plane stalled, went into a nosedive, and crashed into Tampa Bay. He died from blunt force trauma and drowning. So, in this photo, we see Roy in his element, coaching kids, being a dad, celebrating their success. Just 48 hours later, his family was planning his funeral instead of celebrating more victories. Alright, so before the video ends, I do want to let you guys know that there were 2 other images that were going to be in this original YouTube version, but I personally just thought they were a little bit too... I thought YouTube was going to demonetize me for them. So that version, the full version of this video is actually 27 to 28 minutes and something like that. That will be over on my Patreon if you want. You don't have to, but it's only $5 if you want to watch that. But yeah, I just want to make that clear. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like. If you guys want to see volume 1 to this video, I'll leave that in the description, and yeah.
Wow. All I can say is, be careful your day, be careful who you're around. That was crazy, and just be safe out there. And God bless the family and friends, the people who lost someone. Yeah. Just be careful, be safe out there. All I can say, thank you guys for tuning in to the video. Have the most awesome, positive day. Stay grateful, stay blessed. Until next time.